Now, campaigners say schemes to improve hospital food have failed, despite more than £50 million being spent over the last 20 years. The government says some areas have improved, but Sustain is now calling on ministers to introduce compulsory nutritional standards. Well, Charlie Powell is the campaign director. Michael SERES is a patient ambassador. Morning to you both, gents. Charlie, to you first of all, why have things failed? I mean, £50 million over 20 years and things aren't any better?
Yeah, it's a huge sum of money. To put that in perspective, that could create 30 new state-of-the-art hospitals. And the reason this has failed is that successive governments and successive health ministers have relied on voluntary initiatives. So hospitals have been at liberty to decide whether or not they actually improve their hospital food. That's why the campaign for better hospital food is calling for legally binding standards to stop wasting the money. 300 million hospital meals every year, 30 million of which are thrown away uneaten. And that costs £22 million a year. Enough is enough. We need legally binding standards so that all patients benefit from healthy hospital food.
Do we know, Michael, what impact this has on patients in terms of damage to recovery time, or perhaps it has no impact on recovery time at all?
I mean, the bottom line is food needs to be treated properly as part of a patient's recovery plan. It's just as important as the medications you may take, and it's not. It's seen as an extra, something that's shoved on a plate. Half the battle, as you know, with food is you eat with your eyes as well as what you taste. First of all, it looks on a lot of occasions terrible. Secondly, it's tasteless, or it's not hot, or it's not cold when it's supposed to be cold. And I think it's the single biggest topic that patients talk about.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think we've all experienced that, haven't we, at one time or another. Is there a logistical problem here, Charlie, in that we've heard in the past, haven't we, that it is just problematic for hospitals to be churning out the amount of food they do at set times, and with the variations there are now in menus, vegetarian, vegan, diabetic, all the rest of it, which have to be made available, that it is just very difficult to service that?
Well, we know it can be done because there are some examples of very good practice. Some hospitals, for instance, in Nottingham, the Royal Brompton, the Royal Cornwall, they have fresh, locally sourced ingredients, high-quality ingredients, high animal welfare, well within their budgets, and they're providing nutritious solutions to their patients. So it can be done. Unfortunately, those examples are few and far between. We have mandatory standards in schools now. We have mandatory standards for food in central government departments, in prisons, in the armed forces. They do it in Welsh hospitals and they do it in Scottish hospitals. There's really no excuse not to have mandatory standards in English hospitals as well.
Absolutely, I don't get it. I've got 3 teenage kids that go to school and they are entitled to proper standards of food. Yet I, as a patient, I've been a patient for 30 years on the NHS. I had a bowel transplant just over a year ago, so food is vitally important to a patient like myself. And yet we're served food that, to be honest with you, is inedible. I mean, I've been in hospitals in different trusts where patients and staff are doing rotas to fast food chains simply to get hot meals.
I mean, is there a sense that with all of this, I know you'd argue it is not the right solution, but is there a way that patients and their families could perhaps become more involved and look at providing some food themselves? Would that necessarily be a very negative step?
The truth is that's what's happening all the time. Families, friends bring in food the whole time because they get no choice. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the food that you need. But what I think patients don't want is tokenism. So there's going to be new patient inspectors to come around and check the food. There's no powers for those inspectors.
Well, if there are legal standards put in, what is there to enforce that? I mean, where are the teeth?
Yeah, well, if you have legal standards, then you have to have an enforcement regime with those standards. I mean, in the same way that school food is inspected by Ofsted, you would have an inspection regime with fines for hospitals that aren't providing nutritious foods. But at the moment, there's absolutely nothing. There's no safeguards. And unfortunately, survey after survey shows that hospital food is substandard. So 3/4, for instance, of meals that we surveyed would have a red traffic light, meaning high, for saturated fat. About 6 out of 10 are less nutritious than a Big Mac. And it's nothing short of a scandal. At the very time when you're trying to recover from an illness, surely that's the time you need good quality nutritious food.
Final thought, Michael, because we're out of time. 20 years of looking into this, £50 million, nothing's happened. Do you have any confidence at all things will change now?
Not unless they actually sit down on a couch and talk to the patients, come and talk to us. They talk to us about cleanliness on ward, but I haven't seen in 30 years a hospital food manager sit on my bed and sit on patient's bed and go, what do you need? How can we change it?
Scary thing is, I'm not surprised by what you're saying, which is, and I guess
Sadly
a
not.
lot of people watching won't be surprised either. Charlie, Michael, good to see you both this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.